The corridor outside the armory was already loud when it began, not with shouting, but with the low, impatient noise of authority that expected obedience and had not yet received it. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. Now." The voice belonged to a staff sergeant, late 20s, combat patch freshly sewn, plate carrier still stiff from limited wear. His tone was clipped, practiced, and amplified by the attention of his peers. 3 other soldiers stood nearby, watching. 2 Marines leaned against the bulkhead further down the passageway, arms crossed, expressions unreadable. The woman didn't move. She stood just inside the yellow safety line, hands relaxed at her sides, posture neutral. She wore civilian clothes, plain jeans, boots polished out of habit rather than regulation, a gray jacket zipped halfway. Her hair was pulled back tight, streaked with silver, her face weathered in a way that didn't suggest age so much as exposure. "I'm not interfering," she said calmly. "I was told to wait here." The staff sergeant scoffed softly, shaking his head as if indulging a child. "You were told wrong. This is a restricted area. You can wait over there." He pointed down the corridor toward a bench beneath a flickering fluorescent light. She glanced in that direction, then back at him. "I'll stay here." The pause that followed was brief, but it was enough. Enough for the staff sergeant to feel watched. Enough for pride to surface. "All right," he said, voice tightening. "Let's try this again. You don't have clearance. You don't have a badge visible, and you're standing where you shouldn't be." She met his eyes, unflinching. "I've stood here before." That did it. A few soldiers exchanged looks. Someone chuckled under their breath. The staff sergeant stepped closer, invading her space deliberately. "This isn't a discussion. Step back, or I'll have you escorted." She didn't raise her voice. "You can call whoever you need to call." The corridor went quiet. Not silent, but attentive. The kind of quiet that settles when something is about to tip. The staff sergeant straightened, squaring his shoulders. "You think you're special?" She considered that. "No," she said. "I think I'm where I'm supposed to be." The armory corridor was narrow, steel walls humming faintly with the vibration of the ship's engines. Overhead lights cast hard reflections on polished concrete floors. The air smelled of oil, metal, and old paint. More people had stopped now. A pair of junior Marines lingered near the hatch. A Navy petty officer paused mid-stride, sensing something worth witnessing. A small semicircle formed, not close enough to intervene, but close enough to absorb the moment. The staff sergeant felt it. The audience. He turned slightly, projecting his voice. "Let me be clear. This is an active weapons issue. You don't belong here. I don't care who you think you are." The woman's gaze never left him. "I know exactly who I am." That earned a laugh from one of the soldiers behind him. "Yeah? Then show us." The staff sergeant raised a hand, silencing the comment, but not the sentiment behind it. He leaned in again. "You civilians don't get to talk back in my space." Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Not anger, not fear. Recognition. "This isn't your space," she said quietly. "You're just responsible for it today." That landed harder than she intended. The staff sergeant's jaw tightened. "Escort," he said, turning slightly. "Get her out of—" "Staff sergeant." The voice came from behind the crowd. Calm. Even. A gunnery sergeant stood near the far bulkhead, arms at his sides, eyes fixed on the woman. He hadn't said anything until now. The staff sergeant turned, irritated. "Yes, Gunny?" The gunnery sergeant didn't look at him. "How long has she been standing there?" The staff sergeant hesitated. "A few minutes." "Why?" The gunny's eyes flicked briefly to the woman's boots, then her hands, then her stance. "Because," he said slowly, "she hasn't shifted her weight once." The staff sergeant frowned. "So?" The gunny took a step closer. "So nobody does that unless they were trained not to." She barely heard the exchange. Her mind had already slipped elsewhere, back through years measured not in dates, but in deployments. Heat rising off desert sand, the crack of rifle fire echoing between mud brick walls, the weight of a pack cutting into her shoulders as she moved through alleys where every shadow could kill. She remembered her first range, hands trembling, instructor barking, brass hitting the ground like rain. She remembered learning to breathe through panic, to slow the world down until the front sight was all that existed. There was a scar on her left forearm, thin, pale, easily mistaken for nothing. It came from a doorway in Fallujah, a fragment of concrete and shrapnel. She hadn't even noticed until later. In her pocket now, her fingers brushed something small and smooth, a coin, worn thin by decades of handling. No insignia visible anymore, just the weight of it. A reminder of who she'd trained, of who she'd buried, of the standard that never changed. Respect wasn't demanded where she came from. It was enforced by competence. The gunnery sergeant moved closer now, his presence subtle but undeniable. He addressed the woman directly. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "may I ask your name?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she knew what it would do. "Ramirez," she said. "Elena." The gunny froze. Not visibly, just enough. "Say that again." "Ramirez." His throat worked as he swallowed. He looked at her jacket, noticing the faint outline beneath the fabric, an old tattoo near her collarbone, barely visible. The gunny stepped back. "Staff sergeant," he said quietly. "Stand by." The staff sergeant bristled. "Gunny, with respect, stand by." The gunny turned away, already pulling his phone from his pocket. He walked a few steps down the corridor, speaking in a low voice. "Yes, sir. Yes, I believe so. No, sir, she's not identified. Sir, she's here. Now." The staff sergeant watched, confusion creeping into his expression. "What's this about?" he demanded. The gunny ended the call and turned back. "It's about you putting your foot in something you don't understand." The corridor emptied faster than anyone expected. Word moved quickly. Doors opened. Boots echoed. Within minutes, the atmosphere shifted, not with noise, but with absence. Conversations died. People stood straighter. Then came the footsteps. Measured, unhurried. A captain entered the corridor, followed closely by a colonel in dress utilities. Both stopped short when they saw her. The colonel removed his cover. The silence was absolute. He stepped forward and rendered a sharp, formal salute. "Ma'am." Every spine in the corridor snapped straight. The woman returned the salute. Precise. Restrained. "At ease," she said. The colonel turned to the assembled personnel. "You are in the presence of Master Gunnery Sergeant Elena Ramirez, United States Marine Corps. Retired." He paused, letting that land. "She is the architect of the close quarters combat doctrine currently taught at Quantico. She served 28 years, multiple combat deployments, instructor of record for half the NCOs in this building." He looked directly at the staff sergeant. "And she does not need your permission to stand anywhere on this ship." The staff sergeant's face drained of color. The colonel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You made assumptions," he said evenly, "based on appearance, based on gender, based on your temporary authority." He stepped closer. "Those assumptions get people killed." The staff sergeant tried to speak. "Sir, you will stop." The colonel turned to the captain. "Relieve him, effective immediately." The captain nodded. "Yes, sir." The colonel addressed the crowd. "This is not about embarrassment. This is about standards. You do not know who you are talking to. You do not know what they carry, and you do not get to decide respect based on convenience." He turned back to the woman. "My apologies, Master Guns." She inclined her head slightly. Accepted. She looked at the staff sergeant, not with anger, but with something heavier. "You weren't wrong to enforce security," she said calmly. "You were wrong to forget humility." He stared at the floor. "You didn't see a threat," she continued. "You saw an obstacle. That's dangerous." She stepped closer. "Leadership is not volume. It's awareness." She paused. "Do better." Later at the range, she was asked, politely, if she would demonstrate. She didn't hesitate. Her movements were economical, efficient, no wasted motion. The targets fell in rapid succession, controlled pairs, clean transitions, no flourish. When she finished, she cleared the weapon and stepped back. The range was silent. Then someone clapped, once. That evening, the staff sergeant found her alone near the ship's rail. "I was wrong," he said quietly. She nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "Will you teach me?" She considered him for a long moment. "Yes," she said. "If you listen." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the deck in gold. She stood alone, hands resting on the rail, watching the light fade. Not a legend, just a standard.